What you are about to hear beggars belief. At a recent IPCC hearing into the perjury allegations brought by Ian Puddick against DS Ellis regarding the detective sergeant's sudden revelations in court that after floundering while under cross-examination in the witness box, he suddenly proclaimed that during the armed raid some 2 years earlier, he'd remembered finding large quantities of Class A drugs all over Ian's property, as well as the necessary paraphernalia, including an artwork by Damien Hirst, but had forgotten to tell anyone or to confiscate any of these drugs. Everyone in court knew that he'd just invented the story to ease his discomfort. But instead of questioning this blatantly obvious case of perjury, the magistrate dismissed the prosecution's case. And this was the third time this policeman had changed his sworn testimony, perjuring himself on each occasion. But possibly the most worrying and sinister aspect of this policeman's testimony is his knowledge of the Hirst artwork seen in Ian's house, which was actually purchased nearly a year after the raid. It wasn't there when he led the raid, but it was present in Ian's house when he was burgled just before his trial. Detective Sergeant Ellis could have only been briefed about the picture's existence by the burglar. There's no other way he could have known about it. But at this recent IPCC hearing regarding the sergeant's perjury allegations, a colleague of the accused sergeant, a detective Tony Wayne, was on the original raid and for the first time suddenly remembered seeing the aforementioned drugs at that time, but again had forgotten to mention it or to make a note. Every policeman, every straight policeman we have spoken to about this case, have all said that it's impossible for any officer to find Class A drugs and forget to confiscate them, or to make notes in his book. It just doesn't happen. Incredibly though, the IPCC found nothing strange in these amazing revelations, nothing strange about two policemen blatantly perjuring themselves, which illustrates just how stupid and inept the Independent Police Complaints Commission is.
Every time there's a major miscarriage of justice which is exposed, people read about it. For some, they hear for the first time and they think for the first time, goodness, police can be corrupt. And then they probably forget about it. Each time a newspaper is forced to publish the dramatic details of someone serving 20 years and then being released, they say this is the last great miscarriage of justice case. But it never is. There's always another one.
An interesting part of Ian's court case is how the media reported the story. It was reported globally, even as far as New Zealand. However, every news report suggested that Ian had placed thousands of harassing messages on Twitter, Facebook and internet blogs about a board member of Guy Carpenter Limited.
Information, true or false, can be spread around the world in a keystroke. So he went online to discredit her former boss, Timothy Haynes, setting up fake websites to reveal his behaviour.
Part of the prosecution case was that Ian himself was phoning up connections of Haynes, pretending to be a journalist, pretending to be interested in the scandal, and yet that in itself was some form of harassment. Oddly enough, there were journalists who were genuinely interested in the story, and so they phoned up, as did a pollster at one stage phone up. We had to get statements from these people. The interviewing police officer had no interest when Ian said in an interview that genuine people had phoned up and were following up this story. The media did have some interest in the earlier stages, were making phone calls to colleagues of Tim Haynes, and that was legitimate. Again, it was presented as this was part of a course of harassment by Ian. It wasn't him who made the calls. We got the journalists, they looked at their records, they legitimately made the calls. So the entire case was to distort anything Ian did, to allocate anything that happened out of the ordinary to Ian as part of a course of harassment, and it wasn't true. And anyone in the public gallery, as anyone on the jury, and as thank goodness the district judge did, saw through this prosecution case.
I have with me Ron Cuffley, an ex-police and military intelligence officer who was an expert IT forensics witness at Ian's trial.
As you say, I was the expert witness in this case, so I spent the whole of the 3 days of the trial in court, and I heard everything. This particular claim regarding the thousands of tweets and so on was made originally by the officer in charge of this case, Detective Constable Sarah Mayo, who claimed in evidence on oath that Ian had sent out thousands of tweets. However, on cross-examination, she had to admit that she hadn't actually seen even one of these, not one at all, nor indeed had she spoken to anybody who had seen any of these. I think this was part of the prosecution's desire to improve their evidence. Indeed, they went so far as to employ another IT expert, Matt Mansell, and he produced a 4-page report which used clever technical language to seek to imply, without ever actually making the accusation, to give the illusion or the perception that Ian was in some way acting unlawfully with his websites. But once again, on cross-examination, having been given the benefit of reading my report in court, he had to admit that nothing he had said actually applied to Ian, either directly or indirectly. They were merely hypothetical ideas of what might have happened or what could have happened, but had nothing at all to do with Ian.
Corporate America's power over our establishment is well illustrated by this: the main offices of the IPCC, a major government building in central London. The first thing you see is a Starbucks, a huge American corporation that, incidentally, pays virtually no tax. Because of this testimony, the IPCC have now exonerated Sergeant Ellis of all the perjury charges, and furthermore have now placed Ian onto the police's central computer, naming him as a suspect major Class A drug dealer. He will now face years of persecution, and he faces constant harassment, all because a few bent coppers are blatant liars and cheats.